So we start our last afternoon of the program, and we continue about point of view about our topic, that is living cities, but seen on different point of view and different axes. And this afternoon we have the chance to have two lecturers of high quality that work on the natural elements, the climate, and so on, and the relation, of course, with the project, the design at different scales. So it will be, I'm sure, very interesting and useful for our collective reflection. So I have the pleasure to first welcome Philippe Rahm. Where is Philippe Rahm? He's here. Philippe Rahm is an architect. He created an office, Philippe Rahm Architect, in Paris, and he's a precursor, we can say, since a long time about the relationship between architecture and climate. And today, of course, this topic is very important. So he will explain us a little his point of view. And in the second lecture, we will have the pleasure also to welcome Paola Viganò. She's Italian, but she has an office between Milan and Brussels. She's architect, urban planner, and landscaper. And the name of his office is Studio Paola Viganò, but I will say some word later when she will speak. So, Philippe Rahm, it's to you.
Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm happy to be with Europan. I think Europan is a very important initiative. We can discover fantastic new project from young architects, and I was in the jury of Belgium last year, and we have the pleasure to discover very interesting point of view. So today I will present my work and my reflection about climate and the relation with architecture. First of all, is just to remind us that we need architecture for climatic reasons, because we are 37 degrees Celsius animal, and we cannot survive in the cold snow in Switzerland or in the desert under the sun. So we need architecture to create a microclimate around the body where we can successfully continue to live. And this is this type of mythology of the moment when we are losing the paradise, and we should rebuild the paradise inside the house, inside everywhere on the world. So the fundamental reason of why there is architecture is a climatic reason. So when we are building a house, it's to create a microclimate. Then there is this new condition today. It's we can see here on the right that 39% of the CO2 emission that is the cause of the global warming are coming from the building on the global scale. So it means architects, we are on the front line to fight global warming. And so this is something that is completely our task today. So we can say, okay, the conditions are climatic. The reason of architecture is climatic, so why the design could not be climatic too? Why we cannot design by convection, conduction, evaporation? Why we should always design with symmetry, with geometry, but not with emissivity, for example? So I'm presenting a series of projects, and I want to create a link with the history of architecture. I did this exhibition 2 years ago. It will be present in January in Lyon next year, in 3 months. And in this Histoire naturelle de l'architecture, I start to read again the history of architecture based on climatic reason. And if we take this very famous house from Andrea Palladio, it's interesting because when I was a student, we have only an approach, a kind of superstructural approach, an aesthetic approach of this house, and we never understand that it was in reality a kind of climatic machine. And it's explained like that in the book of Palladio. For example, he explained that there is two rooms here. Oh. Up. Okay. So there is the two south rooms are for the winter because you are looking for the sun. The two rooms on the north are for the summer because you are escaping. And on the east and west, it's for the morning and the afternoon. So the reason of the plan is linked to season and to looking for sun, for heat, or trying to find some space without heat. And then the portico are protecting the sunlight, and the sala in the middle is a dome. And this is like by convection, the hot air is always moving up, and so you have to open, and then you remove the hot air, and you keep cold the ground. And the ground, on the ground, you have this kind of grid that let the cold air coming from the underground. So of course the inspiration was that, and it's quite strange because when I was a student, I always heard about the hole in the Panthéon about spirituality, but in reality it's just to let the hot air going out. If not, you are like a cocotte minute. So you need to open the. This is a grid for the cold air, and that comes from the underground. So we did a project based on that. 2 years ago, we get the third prize for that in Lausanne. It's called La Climatech. And so the building is a small square, so we try to minimize the footprint on the site. It's the small square on the top. And we have two strategies, one for the winter, one for the spring when it's not too cold, too warm. So we just open the window, and we have a kind of Palladio sala dome in the middle that let the air going out. And for the winter or for the heat wave summer, we have a controlled system that I will explain now. So for doing the building, we base the building on two poles, like a thermodynamic stratification between the cold area that will become like a summer refuge or for against heat during the summer, and at the top we have a greenhouse, and so it creates a flow of air from down to the top. The hot air is always moving up, and we take the inspiration for the cold pole from the Marie Antoinette. This is this kind of pre-oil fridge. When there is no electricity, it was a milk storage for Marie Antoinette. And so it was using inertia, thermal inertia. It was using, escaping the direct sunlight, and also the fountain was creating evaporation for cooling. And so we took that. We have the possibility because we have the water, the underground water that was just 3 meters down. So we propose to open the underground water, the nappe phréatique, for during the summer. And in the winter, we close it. And so we have this cold water running there, and we create a kind of fountain, a kind of natural cooling in the underground. And then we have the air that arrive, and it's become like a little, like a water pipe, like a narghilé, with the water, the air that arrive down, and then it move up. And we have this form in triangle that will always catch the new air, and then it go to the edge of the building, and then there is a system, and it go out like that. And at the top, we have a greenhouse, and so this is the system like that. There is some more detail about that, but also about effusivity, but I will talk about that a little later. This is a section, and then the plan was, like just a wood construction, and we can change the partition everywhere, and we can see that the grid, so this is influence from Palladio. We have this walking grid on the middle. This is where we can see the small square that become always smaller and smaller, but we can walk on it. And so the building itself become a kind of ventilation duct. So we don't have duct of ventilation. It's all the building, all the typology of the building that is becoming this ventilation duct. So we have an image of that. We can see this grid where the new air arrive and flow all the new the space of the there. Now, I would like to present a project based on effusivity, thermal effusivity. This is a competition we won for the Maison de la Radio in Paris in 2017 for the central area of the Maison de la Radio. And the program was to make a public space with a cafe and a theater and a library, a bookstore, and exhibition space. And so we start to think about the cafe, and we say where it will be good to place the cafe in this space. And so we can say, okay, in the winter, of course, you are looking for sun. In the summer, you are looking for shadow. So we cannot say this is a good place, this is a bad place. We should build a kind of gradation of climate. And so we did a sun analysis during the year, so a kind of synthesis of that. And so where it's red, there is a lot of light. Where it's blue, there is no light. And from that, we transform that into form. And then we materialize this form by effusivity, thermal effusivity. Thermal effusivity, this is something that the people know before. It's for example, when Viollet-le-Duc visit San Pietro in Rome, you know, he talk about the coolness of the basilic, and they are talking about the choice of the marble, and the choice of the marble because it was a cooling material. When you touch marble, you know, you feel it cold, and the choice was to create like a little, like in the milk house from Marie Antoinette, to create a cold house by choosing a high effusivity material with marble. Of course, if you are choosing wood or wool, you know, you are cutting the effusivity. The thermal effusivity is very low, so you keep warm by placing wool. So in reality, the choice, we have lost this thermal choice of the material, because we, during the last 50, 70 years, we choose material only linked to aesthetic. We say, okay, I like carpet, so I place a carpet. I like marble, I place marble. But we've completely lose that there is a relationship between cooling, warming, depending of the material. So what we did for this competition, we map the space by high effusivity material, where we are looking for coolness and for the summer, and low effusivity material when we are looking for warm. So this is a warm, high effusivity, the low effusivity are red, like wool, and the high effusivity is blue. And so the effusivity, this is a real exchange of heat. You touch that, and if it is marble, you are really cooling the body, because you are there. The marble is sucking your heat to your skin heat there, and if you have wool, you feel it warm because there is no heat loss of the body. So it's a real effect. It's not only a sensation, and so from that we transform the interior of the Maison de la Radio, of the center, by mapping that with this different material. So we can see the wool, and then the wood, and then rubber, and marble, and steel in the middle of the space. Just very quickly, a small building we are working now here next to Geneva. The idea is to, in reality, to prepare the air, you know, because there is a ventilation, there is a heat, and so we propose to recombine the question of climate with the question of architecture. So the ventilation preparation of the air becomes a public space of the office building, and so we propose to have two public space, and one will be the grotto, and one will be a greenhouse. And so the greenhouse will work in the winter, you know, to prepare the hot air, and then it go with the ventilation to the office and factory space. And then, so we can see the system. And then, for the winter, we are using the grotto, you know. The grotto is placed on the north, and we are cooling the air there in the grotto by thermal inertia, by evaporation, by the most of the natural system without electricity. And then we use this cold air for the ventilation of the building. Now I'm presenting some urban project, landscape project. So first, this is the new condition of the city. So first, this is this heat wave increase. You know, it's become more and more hot in the city, and also in Switzerland or in Europe. It was less warm before, but now there is some trouble in the summer. The temperature will grow more and more in the next years with the global warming. There is the Europan E16. It's more warm in the city because of the color of the material, because of the ventilation and the evaporation, and the increase of flood also that is becoming stronger. So and finally also the PM 2.5 pollution, air pollution, that are also a problem of the city. So we can say that today, you know, the task of the urban design and the landscape is that. And then we propose also to say, okay, we will change the material. We say wind, light, water, vegetation can be the material of urbanism. And as perspective, alignment, steel, stone, or wood, albedo, effusivity, emissivity are material value as color, texture, symbolism, or convection. So from that, I'm presenting two projects. One project is a competition we won in Milano with Remcolas, with OMA and Laboratorio Permanente in 2019 for two districts, Farini and San Cristoforo. And the idea was to do public space, you know, for this new district that combine not only a social quality but also an environmental quality. So it's so we say we will introduce an environmental infrastructure for defining the new district. So this is what we call limpidarium. So it's like cleaning limpidarium d'aria, cleaning the air or cleaning the underground water of Milano. And so we place these two limpidarium as the main reference of the new district, like the new plaza of the new district. So for Farini, this is it was an abandoned train station, well, not station, but reparation of train. And so from that, we can see that first, you know, when we did the competition, it was in 2018, 2019, and 2018 during the summer, it was extremely hot also in Milan, with a very strong difference between the south where the wind are coming and where the wind are finishing. You can see that the urban heat island effect, you know, that is really warming, you know, when the wind arrive and it's become more and more hot. And also the pollution. If you want to buy an apartment in Milan, of course, you have to choose the west and the south and not the north, because all the pollutants are going there. And also all the heat are going there. And so we propose this limpidarium d'aria. So the new district will be based on a kind of infrastructure, environmental infrastructure. And the task of this infrastructure will be to cool and to clean the air. So for doing that, we are doing that really by using all the possibility we have for creating shadow, having a high albedo surface, like white surface, creating evaporation, you know, the change of phase from liquid to gas, reduce the temperature of the air. So it's why in Spain or in Italy or in Morocco you have a lot of fontaine, because it's like cooling machine. And then we propose to create the most cold pole that can be the starting point of the new wind. So the idea is to create like an urban wind that will, because it will be hot, you know, the wind is always created when you have a cold pole and a warm pole, so it creates a movement of air by convection. And so the air will move and create a freshness inside the new district. And also, it's remove also the pollutant by doing that. And also we have some solution for catching the pollutant of the air by having some specific type of trees. And also, if there is a high pollutant episode, we can have a rain, artificial rain that can, you know, the PM 2.5 will fall down with the rain, so it can be like that. And then we did, like often in our project, some CFD, computational free dynamic model, to analyze where the wind is going. And with OMA, we propose to have a new typology of building that let always the air moving through, so we don't have a dead-end district, so it's always the air can go through all the building. We find some old typology of Milan that was a little similar to that. And then we also do an interesting research about the color of the building. You know, in the postmodern area, you choose the color of the building as you want. You know, if you like red, you say my building will be red. If you like green, you say my building will be green. But in reality, today we can say that no. If I want to cool the city in the winter, in the summer, I need white surface, you know, to reflect the light, but not everywhere, because if you have a white surface also on the vertical, you know, the light will come down and it overheat the street. So it's why we propose to have at the top of the building a black area that will be like a trap for the light, and then you know, it cannot go down, and so it's only the horizontal that will be white to preserve the street, down the street of the excess of heat. So finally, we have this project, and then in this we have another element that was for cleaning the water for the underground by phytoremediation, and so we propose to have like an open swimming pool there. And so the last 10 years, I have worked a lot on this very important project. We won this competition in 2011 with Catherine Mosbar and Ricky Liu in Taiwan. It was a 70-hectare park. This is a French book about the project. So it was on the old airport. We can see the park that starts from this road and go there, and the new district will be built around. And so the project now is finished, it's open. And for doing the master plan, we already work on the climatic ID. So we say why we need a park. In the history, the park was for cooling and for cleaning. It was like that during the 19th century. And so we take again this idea to propose some open space for the citizen where they can enjoy the outdoor, but they can be also protected from the excess of heat. In Taiwan, it's a tropical climate where the sun is very strong and it's very humid and it's polluted also. And we propose to work on these 3 layers, like independent layer on heat, humidity and pollution, and to create the master plan based on that. So this is the final master plan. But for doing that, we first work on the heat. So we say we will analyze where the wind is coming on the park, and we know like when you blow on the soup, you cool the soup like you. So when you have a north wind that arrives on the site, where it's red here, so it will be more comfortable for the people to be there. And so we map that with by the simulation, and then we transform that into a plan, and then into activity and into trees. So we say where it will be cooled by the wind, we will double this cooling effect by placing shadow, and it's why we place a lot of trees there. And then we propose to have all the leisure activities that find place in what we call the coolia, so the most cold area of the park. And then we have the cool pass that will be the most cold pass of the park. We choose very precisely the trees also for having trees with a lot of leaf or big leaf, you know, to create a large shadow. And also a type of ground that will cooling ground by evaporation or by high albedo material. And then about humidity, all the material should stay on site. So the topography are in reality made for managing the rainwater, so it's all the water from the new district, the 250 hectare district arrive on the park, so we manage that there. And this is an image of when it was down, like 3 years ago, and we can see with the flood, you know, how the park is absorbing and managing the excess of water. And then we have a last layer. Just this is like the drying, the dry area becomes the drier, and we have high drainage material, you know, for evacuate. And then we have the final layer. It's on pollution, and we map where there is more noise, more pollutants linked to the road. And far from that, we propose to have trees that will absorb the noise, absorb the pollutant, and we propose to have all the children activity in this place. So the children playground find place in what we call the clearia there. And this is the map of the trees that are always working by gradation. And then finally, we have this, we overlapping these three maps, and it creates a diversity of microclimate. So it can be hot, dry, and polluted, or cool, humid, and clean. So you are free to choose where you want to go, and so it gives a diversity of landscape. So this is some image of the final built project. We have also like 30 buildings also inside the park with some cafe, and this is coming from Instagram. And we have also what we call the climatic devices. So this is like creating mist or all different strategies of cooling. And inside the park, we have 10,000 square meters of photovoltaic panel on the north. All the electricity is produced on site, and more that is required. So we propose to have a kind of canopy of photovoltaic panel, and under this canopy we have building, we have a landscape, we have a car park, and so we can see this space. That is creating a kind of less, you know, it's less hot, you know, and the excess of heat is used for the electricity. And finally, we have also every 50 meters we have a meteorological station, climatic station that measure in real time the temperature. So we can see that, you know, this. So we are measuring the temperature with the humidity, all the pollutant, and we are creating an index. So by air temperature, wind speed, sunlight. So we are mapping that, and we see where it's more hot or more cold in the park. So you have information in real time, some small, very small. Information about that. It's same for the humidity of the air, where it's more dry or less dry. And then for the pollutant, so you have O3 and NO2 and PM2.5 and noise, and so it creates, you can see where it's more polluted and less polluted. And this go on an app. And on the app, you have information about the climate in real time. So we have also designed that, you know, and so we can see the heat map, humidity map, pollution map, and you have information in where you are, you can see the temperature, and you could decide to go in more cold area or less cold area, depending of if it is noon in July, you are maybe looking for coldness. If it is 6 p.m. in December, maybe you are looking more for heat. And so this is like this kind of information there. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Philippe Rahm, for this inspiring lecture that is very well adapted to the acceleration of the change of climate and how architecture and landscaping can play a strong role in adaptation to this change. So I will now invite Paola Viganò. She's there. Paola Viganò is, I told you, architect, urban planner, landscaper. She has a studio called Studio Paola Viganò in Milan and Brussels. And she's a teacher in the Polytechnico of Lausanne. And of course, she's also a Grand Prix de l'Urbanisme she received in France. And she works a lot but in a lot of projects and about the role of the water as a natural element, but as a structural element of the urban planning and change evolution of the inhabited milieu. So I thank you a lot, and I give you the speech. You can use this micro.
So thanks very much for this invitation. At least this time I could visit a little bit the city because in this very fast meeting you don't put your feet on the ground. So that's important that we can understand where we are. You told me that in this city all the water has disappeared. So, of course, somewhere disappears, somewhere very often is underground. So I think it's important to start from this idea that water can be a subject. Water is a subject for many reasons. First, because we are made of water. And as I was explaining to Didier, the kids are 70% of water. And when you become older, this water diminishes. And elderly people are about 40% of water, maybe even less. So the water and life, as we know, are completely connected. And water, until today, has not been considered as a subject. Subject means an individual with rights. There are some campaigns in this moment to give rights to the rivers. And this is a profound transformation of our attitude in respect to the water and to life. So I would like to bring some experiences that are experiences of research, experiences of design, trying to connect a little bit these different moments in which I have the chance to reflect on water and territories, water and cities. The first case is in the Veneto region, so we are close to Venice, a territory that is very complicated in terms of water presence and water management. And you see here, this is a piece of the dry plain, so less than 50 kilometers from Venice towards the mountain. And this is the density of water elements, which are in this case dedicated to irrigation, because the underground is, the lithology is gravel. There are meters and meters of gravel, so the water tends to disappear immediately. If you want to have agriculture, you need to bring water. So this is irrigation, canals realized in different ages, in different moments, that have designed this territory in a very, say, isotropic way, so you can find the same conditions in more or less all the directions. In fact, when you look at this map, the one on the right is the water, and the one in the middle is the street, the roads, and then you have the build. So we understand that this sort of confused settlement organization, what has been described in the terms of diffuse city, is very much connected to the water design, and the water and streets, they work together, let's say. They go in parallel very, very often. And you understand that there is this very diffuse infrastructure related to water that is organizing all the territory. And of course, when you cross this with the type of lithology, you understand that there are very permeable areas, those in the north, so the dry plain. There are less permeable, and also sometimes the water tends to stagnate there. That is the mid-plain, which is much less permeable. There is a lot of clay. And then when you arrive close to Venice, you see the density of the water elements becomes really incredible. And there we are in a condition of polder, like in Holland. So we are until 4 meters below the sea level. And there you have a mechanical system that will pump the water outside of the fields into the lagoon. And then, of course, there is Venice with all its problems related to the water. You start to read the territory with different eyes. As I always say, we need to take the position of the water. If we want to understand the water, you have to put your eyes where the water is, at the height of the water. And by following the water, we understand the enormous amount of work that has been dedicated during millennia, centuries, to make our territories inhabitable. And we can also understand how today this process, this rationalization, has to be rethought because, of course, we have less water because we have to maybe use water in a different way. But what is important is to understand that this territory has been created and designed by these forms of infrastructures. And you find them into the territory because those geometries, those tracés, they are still there, they are still visible. And we understand that they are able to organize something that is so scattered, so disorganized, so chaotic. But because of the water, you can find rules, measures, things that repeat, and that's really given by the water presence, which construct also specific landscapes. This is, for example, the way in which a sort of bocage is along the water elements. And I would like now to dig a little bit more in one part, so in the dry plain I showed before. In the dry plain, you have hundreds of gravel pits because there is the gravel that is extracted, and many of them are abandoned. There will be in the future a slowing down of this extraction activity, but nevertheless, today, this is still present. So the scenario we constructed with a group of hydraulic engineers was to imagine to use these hundreds of abandoned gravel pits in a way to stock water in this dry part of the plain, and imagining to use this water coming from the flooding moments in the summer to help the agriculture to survive in the moment of drought. So at the same time, this is, for example, one situation. You see that the traditional elements of a diffuse city. You see that there is, I don't know if this is also working as a pointer, but probably not.
Function normally. Pierre, you are there.
Okay, doesn't matter. No. In any case, you see in red one of these gravel pits, and in blue many others that are around, just to give you an idea of the density of these elements. And you see some red lines that are the dirty roads that are still present. You see industrial areas and, of course, this kind of more, let's say, light system of housing and smaller activities. On site, this is the situation. We are close to the area of the Prosecco, where they did the production of the Prosecco. And what is interesting is that inside the gravel pit, a different ecotope developed. And then if you go there on the lower level, you see that in fact it was a dumping. It was used as a dump. So it was a gravel pit. There was this violent, I say, activity of extraction. Then it was used as a dump. And then a new biotope developed. So that's also clarifying the strength of nature. And it is a different landscape, a landscape that should not be there. And you can imagine to use this space to collect water in the flooding moments and to reuse in the summer, which is also a way not to use the water from the alpine lakes that are very much under pressure in the summer because they are also very touristic. So the best is to let the water in the alpine lake and to use, on the contrary, this water. If you put together these hundreds of gravel pits, we can accumulate several millions of cubic meters of waters, which can have a very important role in the summer periods. But of course, this is also a way to construct a public space, a territorial, maybe, public space that is connected with other public spaces, the bike path, the small centers, the sport fields. This becomes part of a public space structure at the scale that is not the traditional urban scale. And this small example, we can reconsider all the section from the Alps until the lagoon and rethink completely the role of water. You see, in the first part, you understand that there are the gravel pits, but then we can imagine to reforest some parts. We can imagine to reopen some of the lower parts to reclaim. So it was reclaimed. Now we can abandon the reclamation and we can go back to the water. There are several rationalities inside this type of projects. One of them is a political rationality because, as I said, water is a subject, so it's a kind of a political subject. And by working on this isotropic territory, respecting this isotropic condition is a way also to solve some of the climate and social issues in a way that is much more easy and interesting than going back to traditional type of big works, big infrastructures to solve, for example, the problem of flooding. What I learned from this first chapter of experiences is that by working with water, you are obliged to read the territory. You are obliged to understand and to unveil the rationalities that are present in the territory. And then you start to work with designs that are always multitask. You're never thinking to one element, not just the flooding risk. You have always the drought, for example. You have always the public. You have always the social aspect. So they are multitask design, but especially I insist on the point of unveiling rationalities. We have to understand if the rationalization, so the processes of transformation that we have deposited on our territories are still working, are still adapt, or they have to be transformed in the future with climate change. A second experience is a study we made in the first Euro metropolis, that was the area between Lille, Tournai, and Courtrai. So it's 2 countries, France and Belgium, 3 regions, and 2 languages. In this region, there is a lot of water. There is a lot of water, and at the beginning of the 20th century, Vidal de la Blache wrote in the Tableau de la géographie de la France, là est le trait commun. So there is the common trait. water as a unifying element. And that's very important because it's not clear to anybody why there is a Eurometropolis, why this big perimeter connecting countries, etc. And maybe in observing the proximity of each village, each city to the water, we can understand this common heritage, this common presence, and we can start with this first hypothesis that in this region, water is the unifying element. But once you have said that, then we have to understand that two nations nevertheless represent water in different ways. So here you see on one side a map made by the Cassini family in the, say, between the 18th century and the half of the 19th century. This is a flat land. So you can see how the Cassini were representing the topography. It's a flat land, everybody knows, now around Lille is not really so. But in fact, they represent like enormous canyon, like valleys, because it was fundamental to understand how the water was moving and where the water was going. I think this is an incredible representation, but it's just giving you the idea how you can represent water. On the other side, we have the Ferraris map, same period, more or less. That is where you see the water through all the wetland. So these stripes of green are the wetland. And then you understand that there are several rivers that are along those green stripes. But the problem is that today, even today, it's not easy to connect the two representations. And this is incredible. We speak of Europe, and here is Europan, and then we cannot merge the maps about water. We are still in this situation, and that's why we start with the idea of an atlas. But let's say the second hypothesis, apart of the first, that is this unity through the water, is that by working with the water, we can work on this different type of infrastructure for the contemporary city that is not the strong infrastructure of the past, although we can reuse some part of those strong infrastructures, but it's more a weak infrastructure. Why it is weak? Because the subject, now when we use the term subject for the water, we know that subject is connected to many similar words: subjected, subjugated, violated, victim, fragmented. So this is the story of the water. It has been the story in the modern period, for sure, of a subject that has been aggressed, that has been destroyed, that has been made disappearing. So this weak structure, I think, can play a fundamental role in restructuring the contemporary metropolis or the contemporary city in a territory, as many other territories, that is constructed by the water. But the water, working on waters is very complex, and let's say, is a complexity that you cannot simplify. You have to accept this complexity. But we always try to simplify a little bit. So we propose to work on three different forms of water: the corridors, the capillarity, and the groundwater. Altogether, these three forms of water, they construct what was defined as blue space. As I said, atlas, summer schools, and a series of actions were proposed. And today, all this work has become a sort of guidelines for the Euro metropolis. What are they, those subjects? We have the main corridors that are today part of the Paris Northern Sea big corridor, where you have a big goods that have to pass. A lot of big infrastructures have been realized in order to have this faster type of corridors. But I want to speak of the slow corridors, those that remained aside, that today are not used practically anymore, but which are nevertheless still very, very important inside a territory. The capillary system are the very small water courses. They are everywhere, everywhere. All the territory is closed to one of them. And they are really into the diffuse landscape. And then there is the water you don't see, but that is fundamental to be understood. That is the groundwater. And also there we could understand a little bit the conflicts and the risks that are related to the water, and the exchange also of water in between the different regions. The actors, when you work with water, are a plurality, a very vast plurality of actors. Especially in a case of a trans-border situation, you have really lots of different actors. And this is just those that are directly connected to the water, but then you can add all the other actors, the cities, all the infrastructures that can be related to water. There are so many other people around, let's say, the table. That's the fundamental difficulty when you discuss about water. You have to open a very wide debate about any decision concerning water. So some images about the type of work we made with the different universities, especially the university working around, but also bringing students from other universities. Here we are in Tournai. You see all the water system is designed on the floor, and that was a very nice experience. We met on site all the different water actors. That's also very important that you can be on site with the different actors. And of course, there are the spaces related to the water, the blue space, which, as in this case, is a protected type of space, is a heritage space, and is extremely, I say, beautiful space, is a cultural landscape. And here you meet a lot of questions. First, you have to be able to read how it works. So maybe you don't know that there are canals that go up and down. They are not remaining horizontally or going in one direction, but in this case, no, with a lot of locks, lot of locks. They even go up on the hill and then they go down. These are, of course, cultural heritage, material heritage, and they cross those canals different types of cities. In Lille, so on your left, you have say a kind of middle-class type of city where you have a little bit of green spaces that can be connected to this part of the canal. In the middle, you have a terribly poor part where the immigrants live, where the most of the pollution is concentrated, industrial pollution, I mean. And in the last part, we are in where I took the picture, and it is where the richest live, where the landscapes are the best, etc. So by working along the water doesn't know about social differences, not political differences. The water just passes through, and then you can really understand how to reflect on different social conditions and how this continuity of the water could construct say, a new relations or new links. Because along the water, a lot of things exist. In this case, this is another beautiful canal, the Blaton-Hatt Canal, that is completely unused or underused, only for some practices of this type. But in fact, when you look at the maps, you see that practically a lot of services, all schools, sport fields, etc., are just along those canals because the villages are there. And they are very poor villages. So we thought that in this case, the water could be also imagined as becoming an exchange platform or a space where to construct a public life that today does not exist, and eventually to redesign small public spaces along the water. And going towards the capillarity, The capillarity is this type of landscape. You see and you don't see the water, but you see that there are salics. You understand that's a low and a humid area. And they are, as I said, everywhere. And they are really in very close relation with, as it was said, by the basic structure of the territory. I like to bring this painting from Magritte that represent, in fact, this landscape. Magritte was living in Brussels, and this is clearly this kind of wet, a little bit humid area that is just behind your house, where there is no agriculture, only some animals, eventually. It's not so easily accessible, but it's everywhere. So it's your life landscape, the landscape that is close to your everyday life. And Magritte titled this series of painting The Human Condition. You see, 1933 in this case. The human condition is something that's really touching our human condition of being there in this territory. Of course, as you know, there is a painting in front of the reality. So this painting could be hiding what is behind, or could be eventually mimic what is behind. We will never know about that. But it is very interesting for me, the fact that he decided to represent this very intimate type of landscape. So it is the capillary system. It's a latent hydro landscape. In the Wallonia region, many of them have been completely modified or are hidden today. Many of them are polluted. Here you can see some of their shapes. Each one of them has a name. You can name them. They're really subjects, let's say. And also, at the same time, they can be inside the buildable areas. So the red that you see in the lower image is where you can build. But it's in fact really this low part. And then you have to reflect on, or make people reflect on the absurdity, to go and build into flooding areas and inside such a precious and intimate space. And in the case of Lille, so a bigger city, a metropolis, you understand how the water is still entering the denser part of the city, bringing this kind of humid wetland into in connection with the rest of the city. And you can reflect on the ways in which cities are thinking their relation with the water. The hypothesis of densifying cities is still today very, very present in many cities in Europe. And the pressure that is exercised on the waters is still very, very high. And you have really to reflect on the way in which the city wants to meet the water. And this relation has to be reconstructed. And maybe we have to accept also a certain level of resilience in the sense of accepting some part of this water and not imagining to construct around the water kind of using waters as a central park. Waters needs more space. They cannot live with big walls close to them. In the Flemish region, you have many of this capillary system, and together with this very diffuse type of city, a lot of industrial areas where you can work on new water cycles, purifying and collecting the water. The Flanders region, I don't know if there is someone from Flanders here, but are really menaced by climate change in a very high level. The drought will become extremely problematic for Flanders. Is already problematic, but it will be really even worse in the future. So the idea of collecting, purifying, so working on industrial zones, for example, trying to re-qualify them through the water is a very important theme. And this is also important because you need also to bring some water into the water ground. For example, there is a superficial groundwater that is not easy to use today, while the very deep one is completely, the one in the sand is completely polluted and practically is impossible to use. So the reality is that Flanders has no groundwater that is usable. That's why it depends on the Lille region in terms of fresh water. So this is something that has economic and social consequences and political consequences. And as we know from scholars like Maria Kaika or Zwingedo, there is a very strong political question around the waters. And we understand very well that territories will be in the future also much more dependent on this type of exchange. That's why we decided to dedicate also one year of our study to the groundwaters, which are extremely interesting in this region because there are several types, several levels, and some of them have been completely exhausted, like, for example, the one of the limestone groundwater on the French and the Walloon side, while the one that is today exploited is the chalk water ground close to Lille. The one in Flanders, the sand groundwater, is completely unuseful. So you really understand that territories have very fundamental differences or lack of balance, and all this will be in the future more and more a political subject. So the catchment fields around Lille, part of them, they are already a park. But of course, you cannot imagine that the administration, the city administration can buy thousands of hectares in order to protect all the water that is infiltrating into the territory. And this means that all the territory has to take care of any drop that is entering and infiltrating into the soil, which means that in respect to what is on the land, you have to imagine rules of how to use this territory in function of the necessity to protect the water table. And this means to work on a very, protected type of infiltration. So you cannot infiltrate unless you are sure you are not polluting the groundwater. For example, the industrial platforms, you cannot infiltrate in this case. You have really to maintain all the water separated, while in other cases you can infiltrate and replenish the groundwater. Again, also here is something that is touching at different scales all the territory. And this is a last case where we understand that there are a lot of industrial areas between France, Belgium, and Flanders and Wallonia. But the Wallonian industrial areas are flooded when it is raining. The French industrial areas are abandoned and polluted. And the Flemish need to have new industrial areas. So it seems to be the good occasion to make a European project to dissolve the frontier and to open to a different type of collective or common project, which is not the case, of course. It seems impossible to realize, but in fact, on one side, we have available areas that needs to be depolluted and infrastructures, old train lines, etc. On the other side, we have low-quality industrial areas that are flooded every day. And on the third side, we have entrepreneurs that are looking for industrial areas. So it seems that all the elements are there, but in fact, it doesn't work. So to conclude, this study brought 4 themes to construct a sort of blue park. The first theme is the theme of continuity. When you work with water, you work on continuity. And continuity is a theme that is not always present in our cities. On the contrary, we are mainly working on fragmentation and trying to reconnect something. By working with the water, we are obliged to work on continuity. We work on a composite of coexistences because water is life. Water is the presence of different types of living species. And you have to work with this heterogeneous condition that is our urban system. It's an ecological device, so there is something to be reconstructed in terms of life inside the water, but also in this capacity to be inhabited. And not to forget, there is a fundamental question of upstream and downstream solidarity. When you work with water, there is always someone that is or creating problems. Often, when you are upstream, you are creating problems for the downstream. And there is a question of solidarity. You need to bring into the territorial design, let's say, the aspect of solidarity. This is the last map that brought the idea of this blue space that today is in realization, starting from the big canals. But what is maybe interesting is to look at the length. So the canals, the big corridors are 300 kilometers. If you add the capillarity, just the main, the first and second category, we go to 2,300 kilometers. If we put all the capillary system, it's 5,440 kilometers. And if you put everything, it's almost 6,000 kilometers of potential continuity, of potential ecological device, of potentially coexistent, of composite, etc., etc. So, to conclude this part, I would say that we need to think to what can structure the metropolis of the 21st century. And this weak structure can organize this contemporary extended urban space, challenging traditional drivers and reversing the gaze, because you will look to the territory with different gaze. My third point is related to a different scale, a smaller scale. And here we are in a neighborhood, in a part of Rennes, and is a ZAC, the La Courrouze ZAC, a work that started in 2003 and is still ongoing, not concluded, because it's very big. It's a big neighborhood of, say, almost 5,000 housing units, so it needs some time. It was polluted. It was a very complicated site. The undertitle I put here is Towards an Urbanism of the Living Soil, because we started from understanding the soil of this place that looked very interesting, a kind of nice, fresh, but in fact we understood that everything was polluted and it had to be rethought. The palimpsest of this area is very, very rich. You have a series of layers of different infrastructures and industrial activities. The soil was completely polluted or completely, let's say, modified. And some parts of this soil were still, say, alive. So there was a kind of biodiversity on it. Some of them, the white situations were really completely unuseful in terms of completely dead soils. And some gardens, some green soils were still there. The project, the urban project, is very much related to the previous map. In fact, we didn't follow kind of geometric rationality, but we prefer to follow the rationality of the site by exploring a different type of project. And the water and the soil played the fundamental role in designing this neighborhood. And especially the water trajectories, wadis, swales, basin, ditches, dry, semi-dry, semi-wet, and wet landscapes designed the project. So the fundamental operation of the project are first the ground balance, what you excavate, you use somewhere else, apart from the very heavily polluted parts. And from the point of view of the water, we had to respect the law about water. So you could not evacuate water more than a certain, you see, 3 liters per second per hectare. Practically, we had to transform this place to make an urban part from this site, but this site had to behave as an agricultural soil. That's the meaning of 3 liters per second per hectare. This means that we use topography, this new topography. We had to reconstruct the topography because the soils were polluted. We had to reuse part of the soils to organize these dry, semi-dry, semi-wet, and wet areas to collect the different water coming from the new housing. So you see on the left the very dry areas, the semi-dry, semi-wet areas, and the very wet areas. So in the space of a very small public green park, you can explore all the trajectory between the dry and the wet. And you can imagine that there is a biodiversity that is related to this passage from the dry to the wet. But what is also interesting is that we did this by importing a very small amount of organic soil. So we did with the soil that was almost dead. And what is incredible that with the water contribution, even a very poor soil in 2-3 years became this that you see in this picture. And all this is new, it's totally new vegetation. And then we accompanied, of course, this with the public spaces that go together. Now we walk a little bit inside the project, just to give you an idea of this work of cut and fill, the work of imagining to put the buildings where there was already space, so not concluding. I think that I have to conclude. There is a message here. And a little bit, okay, just give a look to the pictures. For example, there is a small valley that is arriving to the center of the city, so this becomes the occasion to requalify. We collect the water coming from the rest, the existing neighborhoods. We requalify the small water course in the lower part, but there are also some paths along it. You can requalify also the old railways that were passing there. This becomes an incredible place. And of course, then you discover other stories, but I have not the time to bring those stories to you. And this is together also with this respect of the trees, because when I say the water as a subject, you can imagine that also trees are subject, that also soils are subject. This is a profound ontological transformation, no? When you consider them as subjects. And some of the spaces that are related to collect this water, they are earthworks, important earthworks that can also help in collecting this water, but also create occasion for small projects of public space that go together with them. For example, you just raise a little bit, you make a very subtle dike, and you can gain a lot of capacity to stock water. And this small path has been conceived as a small dike going through that define basins where you can stock water. So look at the image on the upper part and look at the transformation in the lower part. This is the time of this project in which you pass from a fresh, polluted area to something that contains ecological dynamics. So I conclude this third part by clarifying this point that is important. Water, design, and urbanism, there is a new alliance. And if I put all together, not the 3 points, we see that risk and climate change can be considered also as connectors, not only as problems. They oblige us to connect things that we were used not to maintain as separate, sectorial, and that cities are socio-ecological laboratories for the transition. And this transition is concerning life. The title of today, The Living City, is very, very explicit about that. But if you speak of life, and if we speak of space, we are speaking also of power. No? That's why I was also spending some time on the effect of actors and the dependencies between one territory and the other. So it is really a new biopolitical project that is under formation, that maybe we will design in the future if we can, let's say, discuss the fundamental shift that we have to go through. That was a second conclusion, but I don't know if I have a minute to say a few words about Venice. I have? Okay. I want to use Venice because I want to get to the point. The point is to speak of this disruptive power of resilience. We have some difficulties, I think, to manage the concept of resiliency. There is a kind of sweet way not to consider resilience and, oh, okay, you adapt a little bit, then you come back as before. But things are always a little bit more complicated. And when we reflect on Venice, that you see there in the middle of the lagoon, a territory that has been, say, constructed by the waters, but also defined politically by the waters, where the waters have been diverted in order not to bring the rivers, in order not to bring the sediments into the lagoon. For Venice, it was fundamental to have the lagoon, because the people, the armies arriving from the sea by boat, they could not enter the lagoon. The lagoon was too shallow. But also, the armies arriving from the inland with the horses, they could not go into the lagoon with the horses. So it was the only way to save this place, maintain the lagoon. Today, maybe you don't know, but there are people that are living into the lagoon. Immigrants, entrepreneurs, kids. There are different types of people. And if we want to save Venice, as I already said in other occasions, you have to save the planet. There is no other way to save Venice. You have to save the planet. Because the only possibility to think about a future for Venice is that the sea level rise would not go beyond a certain height, so the 50 centimeters. In order to maintain this sea level rise inside these 50 centimeters, all the planet should change. And the emissions and degrees of temperature should not continue to evolve, and the sea level rise should remain more or less inside this plus 50 centimeters. Let's say that if it will be more than that, there are probably no solutions. If we can make this effort, that is, as I said, is a planetary effort, maybe there is something we can think. We made this work with the students. We worked for 2 years on this amphibian project that is a utopia. Amphibia is a utopia. And we described Venice, all the threats that the lagoon has to survive with, so the loss of the wetland, the loss of the very bad impact of the artificial channels, the new jetties that have been realized and emphasized in order to make the system the most that should save Venice, but will probably not save Venice. You see that there is an erosion, a progressive erosion of the lagoon that is becoming practically a piece of the sea, so which of course is creating other problems. There are peak inlet water flow that are very violent, so that's also very devastating for the architecture. And there are scenarios about Venice. There is a first scenario that is to transform the lagoon in a lake, so to close the mouth and to just make a sweet water lake. I think it's problematic, this scenario. there is a second scenario that is say, but you see, in fact, the sea is already inside the lagoon. You see the sea bay, the black part. So why don't we save a piece of the lagoon? We close, the red line is we close it. We can maintain the industrial area of Marghera because it will have its canal going towards the sea, the Adriatic Sea. And then we can eventually also close in the lower part. So we will have this kind of fragmented lagoon. One part of it will be sea. And then you can make your economic industrial activities continue. But of course, amphibia has a different, idea. Here we imagine that we can live with the water, that if the water will not raise, as I said, if all the planet make efforts and we remain inside the 50 centimeters of sea level rise. So in this scenario, we demolish the inlets. We bring the harbor and we say, you cannot have an harbor in a lagoon, put somewhere else or use other harbors that already exist. Maybe some of the rivers that have been deviated in the past, we re-put them into the lagoon so that some sediments can feed the lagoon, because the lagoon today is too deep, and this erosion is also creating problems for Venice. So we propose a series of interventions, radical interventions, in order to have a possibility then, once this is done, to start the renaturation and the restoration of, for example, all the wet areas that are fundamental for also lowering down the speed and the strength of the water entering from the sea. So restore the barene, that's the name, and bring new sediments in order to slow down the strength of the waves. But also, you need more space for this water. So you have to go back to the reclaimed land that were reclaimed mainly starting from the 19th century and then in the 20th century. Today, to maintain those areas dry, we spend a lot of energy, so those areas consume, just to maintain them dry, the same energy consumption as a city of 100,000 people, just to move the water, just pumping the water out. So we say, okay, let's stop. There is an agriculture there, but maybe it's too expensive. Today we cannot imagine to have space and that is so expensive in terms of energy consumption. So we give more space also in inland to the lagoon, and that's also a way also to have a new dynamic flooding edge. And then the different blue is again is a half dry, half wet or water landscape, and from there the journey of this person that come back from amphibia and tell us how amphibia was. There is a video, but I'm not showing you the video, just some images. In black is the story of the past. So the people of amphibia, for example, destroyed the jetties towards the sea, and then by destroying them, they also close a little bit the mouth that today are too deep, and then the waves are entering with enormous strength. And then in color, you have this amphibia, where you say, where the warehouses in some of the islands, like Murano, for example, they can accept to be flooded. So you can accept to have this movement of the water that is coming and going. And this part of what I think is the resilience. Now, the Venetian Republic followed a trial and error method. So they knew very well that it was important not to create deadlocks that could impact in a negative way the hydrologic mechanism of the local ecology. So in any case, there was always a trial period in which all the effect was monitored. If the effect by the intervention was endangering the lagoon, the process was reverted. If not, the process could continue. Any adaptation work that was done had to be reversible. That's something that if we integrate this in our design, I think that will make some change. And what is also very interesting is that while Venice was becoming an international economic power, in the same moment, the Republic was practicing this policy of conservation to maintain and restore the natural balances that made the living in the lagoon possible. So it has been defined as an ever-evolving testing laboratory where it was clear that there was a fundamental subordination of the individual interest to the collective future good. I mean, these are, for me, sentences that should be engraved in the policies of our cities. The fundamental subordination of individual interest to the collective future good. And then to close, something a bit more poetic. This is very, very strong. Italo Calvino wrote something about Venice. The aquatic city as an archetype of imagination and as a structure that responds to fundamental anthropological needs. He said, I believe in the future of water cities, in a world populated by countless Venice. The force with which Venice acts on the imagination is that of a living archetype that faces utopia. I mean, I think that is important, not because we conceive Venice just as a problem. Venice and many other situations similar to Venice. And for him, this is the future of the city. That's interesting, no? To look with the different eyes, with the new eyes to these problems. And I think this is the very last of it. There is only one left. I'm now working in one of the valleys between Germany and Belgium that were flooded last summer, in summer 2021, with enormous waste problems, social, very difficult social conditions. And this is the human chain that has been realized a few months ago. In this human chain, there was a Flemish volunteer, part of an association that organized this human chain. And he told me, I come from Ghent. I came the day after the floods. We had to help people. We came almost every weekend with the bus. If in 20 years the sea covers us, Flemish people, we hope that the Walloons will come to help us too. I think that's very nice, no? Because you understand that we are entering in a period, I think, where the question of solidarity will become really crucial. And everybody knows that for one reason or for another, we will need to be helped. We will accept, in part, the phenomenon. This is the resilience, to accept. But also we will need a solidarity around. Because, in fact, what we share is life. We have a life in common. And Edgar Morin wrote on, I think, Libération last year, in a moment that was still related to the COVID-19 pandemic. He wrote that beyond the idea of ecological transition, which reduces the problem to that of the transition from a non-green society to the same ecologized society, in fact, it is the complex metamorphosis from one type of society to another one. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paola. Thank you for this fantastic lecture about the strategic role of water from territorial scale. But what is interesting also is to connect to proximity scale in urban design. So I think it's really strategic. So thank you again to our two lecturers. Considering the time running, we pass directly to the third debate of of the day. And the last one, the family in